The city skyline gleamed like glass and gold that night, the kind of evening made for champagne, secrets, and people who pretended to have it all. Nathan Hale and Dakota moved through the room like the couple everyone envied. He, the silver-tongued partner at one of the city's top law firms. Precise, magnetic, always in control. She, elegant and composed, the quiet balance to his brilliance. But beneath the perfect choreography of smiles and handshakes, there was something colder, something Dakota had stopped ignoring. It started with the silences, the late meetings, the calls that went unanswered. Then came the lies, subtle at first, expertly phrased, as if Nathan believed truth was just another contract clause to manipulate. Dakota wasn't naive. She had built her own small legal consultancy before marrying him, a mind sharper than she let on. But marriage to Nathan had become a performance, and she had learned to play her role well. Until the night she saw the text. It wasn't meant for her, of course. His phone had lit up across the dinner table. A name she didn't recognize, a message that read, "Same sweet tomorrow. I'll bring the wine." Nathan's expression never changed as he saw her eyes catch the screen. He simply smiled, took another sip of his drink, and said softly, "Don't overthink it, darling. You know how clients can be." That was the moment something inside her went quiet. Not rage, not heartbreak, just silence. The kind that precedes calculation. Over the next weeks, Dakota moved like a ghost through their home, watching, listening, memorizing. Every routine, every email he sent from his private account. Nathan was careless in his arrogance. He believed control meant immunity. He believed she'd never fight him, that she needed him too much. He didn't know that Dakota had already begun documenting everything. The transfers from client accounts, the shell companies in the Cayman Islands, and the affair. Not just a fling, but with his paralegal, the one who handled confidential case files. One night, while Nathan was out meeting a client, Dakota opened the hidden folder on his home computer. Password protected, of course. But he'd forgotten. She'd helped him set up that very system years ago. The code was his mother's birthday. Inside the folder were invoices, bribes disguised as consulting fees, and photos, evidence tying Nathan's firm to illegal campaign donations. It was all there. Enough to ruin him. Enough to dismantle everything he'd built on lies. But Dakota didn't react. She didn't confront him. She printed what she needed, encrypted it, and stored the files under a different name in the cloud. Then she smiled for weeks. She played her part beautifully. Dinner, events, affection on display. Even laughter. Because she knew what was coming. By spring, Nathan had grown bolder. He started dismissing her questions, mocking her intelligence. "You wouldn't understand how this business works," he'd say. Or worse, "Sweetheart, you married up, enjoy it." That last line stayed with her. Not as an insult, but as a reminder of how easily he underestimated her. Then came the dinner party. The one that changed everything. Nathan had invited partners from the firm, a few judges, and a handful of wealthy clients. The room buzzed with laughter and expensive perfume. But as Dakota watched him perform, the charm, the ease, the false humility, something in her shifted. He wasn't just unfaithful. He was untouchable, a man who thought power meant permanence. And that was his mistake. Because that same night, while Nathan toasted his latest victory, Dakota made her own quiet toast. To patience, to evidence, and to justice. When she left the party early, no one noticed. She drove home, opened her laptop, and finalized a file labeled Project Eclipse. Inside it, every document, timestamp, photo, and testimony she had gathered. Her next email was to a name Nathan had only mentioned once. A federal prosecutor specializing in corporate corruption. Subject line: regarding potential misconduct at Hale and Brennan LLP. That night, the city slept. Nathan didn't come home until nearly dawn. When he did, he smelled of whiskey and someone else's perfume. He kissed her cheek absently, never seeing the calm in her eyes. For the first time, Dakota didn't feel small. She felt powerful, steady, invisible, and in control. The storm began 2 weeks later. Federal agents arrived at the firm just after sunrise. Computers were seized. Phones were confiscated. Nathan's name was everywhere. On the documents, the wire transfers, the false declarations. He called her that morning, his voice trembling for the first time she could remember. "Dakota, something's happening. They're saying I'm involved. You have to help me. Tell them I'm innocent." She listened quietly. The same calm tone she'd used when he lied to her months ago. "Of course, Nathan," she said softly. "I'll do exactly what you taught me. Follow the evidence." The line went silent. And for the first time in his life, Nathan Hale had no words. Dakota looked out the window that morning, watching the sun rise over the city. It was quiet, beautifully, perfectly quiet. The silence she'd felt that night at dinner had returned. But this time it wasn't despair. It was victory. Silent, patient, and complete. Morning sunlight poured through the blinds like interrogation lights. Sharp, revealing, unforgiving. By the time Nathan reached the office, chaos had already taken root. Agents in dark suits combed through file cabinets. Secretaries whispered behind trembling hands. A few partners tried to act composed, but their eyes darted like trapped animals. And Nathan, the man who once owned every room he entered, now looked like a man waiting for permission to breathe. "Mr. Hale," one of the investigators said, "we'll need you to come with us." His jaw tightened. "This is a mistake," he muttered. "You have no idea who you're talking to." But they did. Every document bore his signature. Every transfer had his authorization code. And in the sealed evidence box, an anonymous file labeled Project Eclipse. At home, Dakota brewed her morning coffee as the news anchors read the headlines. Breaking. Prominent law firm Hale and Brennan under federal investigation for fraud and campaign finance violations. Her reflection in the window was calm, unreadable. The kind of calm that only comes when you've already rehearsed a moment 100 times in your mind. The phone rang again. Nathan. Then his assistant. Then a reporter. She let them all ring. For years, she had been the silent observer, the background character in his story. Now he was the one being written about. And the world was turning the page without him. 3 days later he finally came home. The man who once radiated confidence now looked hollow. His tie was loose, his eyes bloodshot. He moved like someone walking through the ruins of his own empire. "Dakota," he said, shutting the door behind him. "You've seen the news. You have to help me. You know I didn't do half the things they're saying." She looked up from her desk. Her laptop glowed softly. Spreadsheets, timelines, notes. "I don't think I can help," she said simply. "They have too much evidence." He stepped closer, voice rising. "Evidence? You mean lies? Fabrications? Someone set me up." She turned to face him then, slowly, her expression composed. "Who would do that, Nathan?" For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy, suffocating. He searched her face for something, anything familiar. But all he saw was distance, the kind that no apology could cross. The next few weeks blurred into headlines, hearings, and frozen bank accounts. Nathan's partners turned on him, claiming ignorance. The firm crumbled. Investors fled. And Dakota, she watched it all quietly from the back of the courtroom, dressed in black, face unreadable. When reporters asked for a statement, she only said, "I trust the justice system to do its job." They took that quote and printed it everywhere. And for Nathan, it was worse than any accusation. Because he knew she did trust the system. She'd built the trap herself. At night he started calling again. Not with anger this time, but desperation. "Please, Dakota. Tell them I didn't mean to hurt you. You're the only one who can save me." But she didn't answer. She sat on the edge of their once shared bed, staring at the faint imprint where he used to sleep. There was no joy in watching him fall, just a quiet, cold satisfaction. Justice wasn't supposed to feel good. It was supposed to feel right. By the time the trial began, Nathan had lost everything. His firm, his reputation, and the home they once called theirs. He stood before the court, pale and trembling, his once commanding voice breaking under cross-examination. The prosecutor, the same one who'd received that anonymous email months earlier, laid out every detail, every transfer, every offshore account, and then the final blow. A witness statement from Dakota Hale. The courtroom murmured. Nathan's head lifted in disbelief. Dakota walked to the stand in calm, measured steps. Her voice didn't waver once. "I'm here to present the documentation I personally discovered," she said. "I was unaware of the full extent of my husband's actions until I reviewed his files. I believe the evidence speaks for itself." She didn't look at him once. Not when he tried to catch her eye. Not even when his attorney whispered, "Do you wish to cross-examine your wife?" Nathan just shook his head. For the first time he understood the battle was over. That night, as rain tapped against the courthouse windows, the verdict came in. Guilty on all counts. Nathan's shoulders sagged as the gavel fell. He didn't even turn around as the guards took him away. But Dakota, she stood still, her expression unreadable. Outside, the city lights shimmered against the wet pavement, the same city that once celebrated his success. Now it whispered his downfall. When she reached her car, she finally allowed herself to breathe. Not smile, not cry, just breathe. Years of humiliation, silence, and deception, gone with a single verdict. The world saw her as the betrayed wife. They didn't know she was the architect of his ruin, and she preferred it that way. Because true revenge, she thought, isn't loud. It's silent, precise, and when done right, it leaves nothing standing. The morning after the verdict, the city felt quieter. Not because it had changed, but because she had. For the first time in years, Dakota didn't wake up to tension humming in her chest. The phone didn't ring. The whispers were gone. The air itself felt cleaner, lighter, like her life had finally exhaled. She stood by the window of her new apartment, overlooking the skyline that once belonged to him. The headlines scrolled across the news ticker below. Hale sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Hale and Brennan files for bankruptcy. Wife testifies against husband in historic legal case. She read the lines without emotion. They weren't her victory parade. They were a record of balance being restored. The world called her brave. But bravery wasn't what had driven her. It was clarity. The moment she realized that survival wasn't about endurance, it was about reclaiming control. That afternoon, she visited her lawyer's office to sign the final divorce papers. The young clerk looked at her with wide eyes. "You really stood up to him," she said softly. "I don't know how you did it." Dakota smiled faintly. "I didn't stand up to him," she replied. "I just stopped standing behind him." Months passed. The scandal that had shaken the legal world began to fade from the front pages. Nathan became just another fallen name, one more cautionary tale whispered about in boardrooms and law schools. But Dakota didn't fade with him. She had quietly started something new, a legal consultancy for women blindsided by financial and emotional betrayal. Her clients came in broken, ashamed, terrified. And one by one, she taught them what Nathan had once used against her. Knowledge, leverage, law. Her office was small, tucked in a corner of downtown. No marble floors, no designer glass doors. Just a warm light, a pot of coffee, and her name on the frosted glass. Dakota Hale Legal Advocacy. At first, she thought she wanted to forget his name completely. But then she realized keeping it was power. It was proof that she could turn what once destroyed her into something unstoppable. One evening, as the last of her staff packed up, she stayed behind, reviewing case files under the golden desk lamp. That's when she saw it. A small envelope slipped under her door. No return address. No markings. Inside was a single photograph. Nathan in prison clothes, sitting at a gray metal table. Eyes tired, head bowed. No message. No threat. Just him. She stared at it for a long time. Then she placed the photo face down and exhaled slowly. It wasn't fear she felt. It wasn't satisfaction either. It was closure. Because in that image, she saw the man who once made her feel powerless. And now, he couldn't even raise his eyes to meet hers. Weeks later, an unexpected invitation arrived. A panel discussion on women and justice in modern law. Dakota hesitated at first. She had no interest in fame or recognition. But something in her wanted to speak. Not about him, but about what came after. The event hall was packed with journalists, lawyers, and young students hanging on every word. When she stepped onto the stage, there was a quiet murmur, the kind of reverence reserved for survivors who refused to stay silent. She adjusted the microphone, her voice calm and steady. "I'm not here to talk about my past," she began. "I'm here to talk about power. Because sometimes it doesn't come from strength or anger. It comes from patience. And from knowing exactly when to stop waiting." A ripple of stillness moved through the room. She looked up, meeting the audience's eyes. Each one reflecting a different kind of pain, a different kind of resilience. "Justice," she said softly, "isn't just about punishment. It's about restoration. And sometimes the person you have to restore first is yourself." After the applause faded, she walked outside into the cool night air. The city glowed, quiet, pulsing with life. For the first time in forever, she wasn't running from shadows. She was walking toward something new. Later that night, she sat on her balcony, sipping tea, watching the lights flicker across the skyline. Her assistant had texted earlier. "You did amazing tonight. The room loved you." Dakota smiled faintly, setting the phone down. In the distance, she could see the old courthouse dome, glinting under the moonlight. Full circle. He had once ruled that world. Sharp suits, sharp lies, sharp edges. Now it was hers. Not through manipulation but mastery. Justice had been served. Not by vengeance, but by precision. And as she closed her eyes, a quiet satisfaction settled over her. Nathan Hale had taught her the rules. But Dakota Hale had rewritten them. Autumn had arrived. Crisp air, orange leaves, and the kind of stillness that made every sound feel amplified. It had been a year since the verdict. Dakota's life had moved forward in measured peace. Her firm had grown. Her name carried weight in circles that once ignored her. But lately, she'd felt something unsettled. Not regret, not guilt. Just unfinished silence. And so, one Friday morning, she drove to the federal penitentiary where Nathan Hale was serving his sentence. The building loomed against the pale sky. Concrete, sterile, and stripped of pretense. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as guards checked her ID. The air smelled faintly of bleach and metal. A correctional officer led her down a long corridor lined with cold steel doors. The echo of her heels filled the emptiness. When they reached the visitation room, the guard nodded. "You've got 15 minutes. Dakota nodded once. She stepped inside. Nathan sat at the far end of the table. The man who once commanded boardrooms now wore a plain gray uniform. His posture hunched, his face thinner, older. He looked up, disbelief flickering in his eyes. Dakota! Her name sounded fragile coming from him, like something he no longer had the right to say. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them carried years of betrayal, love, anger, and consequence. "You came," he said finally. "I didn't think you would." "I wasn't going to," she replied softly. "But some endings deserve to be witnessed." He let out a bitter laugh, hollow, dry. "So this is what victory looks like." Dakota tilted her head slightly. "Victory?" She smiled faintly. "No, Nathan. This is what truth looks like." He leaned forward, eyes dark with the same arrogance she remembered. Dimmed but not gone. "You think you're clean in all this?" he asked quietly. "You think ruining me makes you better?" She met his stare evenly. "I didn't ruin you, Nathan. You did that all by yourself. I just stopped helping you hide it." He opened his mouth to reply, but the words seemed to die halfway. His shoulders slumped. For the first time she saw not anger, but recognition. "I loved you," he whispered. "You know that, don't you?" Dakota's expression softened for just a second. "I know you loved control," she said. "You just confused it with love." He looked away, his jaw tightening. The weight of the words hung between them, sharp, unmovable. After a long pause he said, "They're offering me a deal. Early release for cooperation. I could rebuild when I get out. Maybe there's still time." She exhaled, almost a sigh. "You still think in terms of rebuilding," she said quietly. "You never understood. Some things aren't meant to be rebuilt. They're meant to end." He stared at her, a mix of defiance and something like sorrow. "You came all this way just to remind me I lost?" "No," she said. "I came to tell you I forgave you." The words hit him harder than anything she could have planned. His eyes widened. "Forgave me," he repeated, almost disbelieving. She nodded. "Forgiveness isn't for you, Nathan. It's for me. I won't carry your weight anymore." For the first time since she'd entered, the tension seemed to lift, like the air had shifted. The guard tapped on the glass. 5 minutes. Dakota stood slowly. "I used to think revenge was about making someone feel what they made you feel," she said softly. "But that's not justice. Justice is when you can finally look at the person who broke you and feel nothing." She turned to leave, then paused. Nathan's voice cracked behind her. "Dakota, wait." He didn't. As the door closed behind her, his voice faded into the hum of fluorescent lights. Distant, powerless, small. Outside, the world was brighter than she remembered. The wind carried the smell of rain and pine. She pulled her coat tighter and walked toward her car. Through the chain-link fence, she saw the gray walls of the prison. Silent, unmoving, absolute. For years, those walls had existed inside her. Invisible but heavy. Now they were behind her. She started the engine, rolled down the window, and took one last look at the horizon. The sun was setting. Golden light spilling across the road like a promise. That evening, back in her office, Dakota unlocked a small drawer in her desk. Inside was the old photo, the one of Nathan sitting at the metal table. She looked at it for a moment, then quietly fed it into the shredder. The paper disappeared in clean, mechanical lines. No rage, no tears, just release. She walked to the window. The city lights shimmered. Just as they had the night everything began. Only now, the reflection staring back wasn't a woman trapped in someone else's world. It was someone who had learned to build her own. Quietly, patiently, perfectly. Some stories don't end in fire. They end in silence. The kind of silence that comes after truth, when every lie has finally burned away. I didn't win because I destroyed him. I won because I remembered who I was. Long before he tried to rewrite me. The camera would linger on the city skyline. Dusk falling, windows glowing like stars. And the soft echo of her heels fading into freedom. Not every battle is fought with fists. Some are won with truth. If you believe in justice like Dakota did, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that prove revenge can be poetic.